We are that close to a situation where you basically need a digital ID to go online. The right to work is the first one, then the right to rent, banking, education, childcare, voting. 5 billion was wasted last time this country tried to introduce digital IDs. That's about 50 times the amount of the Border Security Command. Very, very clearly, this isn't about immigration. The Starmer government has just introduced mass bank spying powers on the premise of rooting out welfare fraud. The Home Office right now is supporting essentially an expansion of live facial recognition across multiple police forces. The time to really put up a fight is now.
Relax, relax. This isn't an ad. If you're not a fan of ads but love TRIGGERnometry, join the thousands of TRIGGERnometry members who get extended interviews, no ads, early access, and the ability to submit questions for upcoming guests. Sign up now at triggerpod.co.uk or click the link in the description of this episode.
Silkie Carlo, welcome back to the show. We love you so much, so it's a pity that basically we only get you on when the government is about to do something really evil.
Yeah.
But
true.
you are obviously the head of Big Brother Watch, and you work on stuff like digital ID, which the government is just announced they're going to introduce. Without imposing our own views on it, tell us what are digital IDs and what your concern about them is.
Digital ID is going to be a mandatory digital identifier that we all have to have in this country, basically an entry on a government database, which is the seed for something very, very different in this country. We've never had to carry ID of any type, not since the Second World War. In peacetime have we had to carry ID papers in this country. But now we will have to, and it will have to be digital. And it will be the beginning of a massive digital record about every citizen in this country. So I think the questions now and the conversation now is about how far will that grow, how much data will be on it, where and when will we need to present it, and how might it be used in a way that it effectively becomes like a license, like a permit, that it can be taken away or required for certain things. The government has said in the first instance it will be required in order to work. But already we've heard from ministers over recent days about the numerous other ways in which you will have to have a digital ID to live your life.
Such as?
So the right to work is the first one, then the right to rent, so that you would have to show your landlord your digital ID.
Hang on, sorry. Your right to live somewhere
Yeah,
is going to be tied to your digital ID.
Just to make sure you're not an illegal immigrant, mate.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And the other thing that's notable about that is that this is an ID that you don't only need to show to the state, but you also need to show it to other peers, to civilians, because it's for these kinds of, to your boss, to your landlord, to a bouncer. And so the other types of uses that have already been mentioned, including on the government's own website, are banking, education, childcare, voting. So the possibilities are endless and numerous. And as you say, they really go to the very basics of living your everyday life. If you didn't have one, then immediately you won't be able to work.
Silkie, so a lot of arguments have been made about why this is actually a good thing. Now, one of them is illegal immigration. In fact, the government is leading with that, which I think is complete rubbish for reasons that we'll get into. I don't think it's going to do anything to stop illegal immigration. But there are countries which have digital ID. There are people who say, actually, it's super helpful, it's super convenient, it's super easy, it makes things safe. We know who everyone is. Some of these things will sound dystopian already, but also there are some benefits, aren't there?
I think anything that is, almost anything that is oppressive can have some benefits. And especially if you're a prime minister who wants to build a really big state and have lots of information about people and know where they are and what they're doing, you could frame that as a benefit and say that it's a good thing. And certainly for individuals to have a digital ID of some type, that could be beneficial if you choose to. You can get them in the private sector. Some people get them from their governments. I think what's very, very different is the idea of a digital ID system being imposed on the entire population and then made mandatory, made as a gateway in order to live your life, in order to work and rent, collect benefits and everything else. It is also important to say, in a lot of the examples that have been thrown around recently about the other countries that use digital ID, what's overlooked is that they are linked to human rights abuses everywhere, actually, and also to cybersecurity incidents. So Estonia, for example, is always brought up as the example, completely different to Britain, very small population, and it has what they call the world's first digital government. So it's kind of like a digital experiment, quite dystopian if you ask me. But even there was a security flaw with their digital ID system, and 750,000 people lost access to their digital ID, which then stopped them from doing things because of this security flaw, which of course can upend your whole life. If you look at India, for example, and the biometric ID system that they have there are countless deaths that have been associated with the digital ID because of connectivity problems and again, basically technical problems with the whole system, the way that it's been used to then lock people off of the services that they're otherwise entitled to. And I think there is, you can't always compare these countries with the UK, but there are some lessons to be learned. If you think about, for example, going to see the doctor or going to the NHS, at the moment, it's free at the point of use. You just go and you do it, and that saves people's lives. The more barriers that you start putting up with things like digital ID in a country where millions of people it doesn't matter what Starmer says, will never have one, whether they choose not to or because they can't. All of that language about access that the government use, we're making it easier for people, we're giving people access. No, what they're actually doing is putting up a barrier and then saying certain people can come through and everyone else would be left behind. So certainly not the case. So if you look around the rest of the world, this works perfectly everywhere else. If someone says that to you already, I just think they're lying or they're misinformed.
The thing that really worries me, Silkie, is if you had told me this in 2019 or 2018, I wouldn't have been as worried or as suspicious of government. But after COVID, after lockdowns, after people were getting arrested for going to the beach, I'm like, under no circumstances. I mean, think about a COVID type situation. What would that involve with digital ID?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think already we know that, God forbid, if there's another pandemic, this mandatory digital ID becomes a mandatory vaccine ID. Starmer already supported that during the pandemic, and of course the Johnson government introduced them, and that's what we had. We also had contact tracing, where everyone had to use a QR code to go to the pub. Basically, you had to use it to scan in and create a log of all of your social interactions and everything that you were doing. Apply that context with a digital ID, and suddenly you've got something that's not just about getting a job, but actually that creates a very, very comprehensive record of everything that you're doing, and again is used like a permit. If you don't have the right vaccine status, you're not going to school, you're not traveling, you're not, whatever the conditions are. And I think that's a realistic concern. I think something that a huge portion of the public is very, very alive to that risk. And so we should be. Every future moral panic that this country faces will have digital ID present itself in some format as the solution. If you also think about the moral panics we have online, and this is where I really worry about how digital ID will play out, because we see so many moral panics about the internet. We will see digital ID introduced as a solution. Children online and their safety, age gating the internet, making sure that people can only see certain content, if they're this or that age. It's a nightmare. Already under the Online Safety Act, we have now age requirements, ID requirements for the internet. We are that close to a situation where you basically need a digital ID to go online. And of course, when this is introduced, the answer will be, well, why aren't we using digital IDs for access to the internet when there's a pandemic? Why aren't we using it to scan people's vaccine status? And so we're going to see this very, very quickly spiral out of control, I think. And I don't think it's just, I don't want to put too many conditions on what I'm saying, but just to be absolutely clear, it won't be acceptable for anyone to say that raising these risks makes you a conspiracy theorist. We have to put that idea to bed, because what we are actually saying is this is a politically and historically informed risk assessment, basically, of what's coming. And we've been through that experience just in the last few years with COVID.
Well, absolutely. And the other thing that really worries me is this word safety, Silkie, because we can see the more we've gone through this period of time, we know that words are being used in one context, but they mean something else. For instance, safety, this is a safe space. No, it's not a safe space. It just means you don't want your ideas to be challenged. So when people go safety, will that mean people who have the wrong opinions aren't allowed in a particular space? Will it actually mean, like you say, a vaccine, if you haven't taken your vaccines? Will it mean, for instance, if you attended a particular protest, does that therefore mean that that is the wrong type of protest? You are far right. Oh, maybe you don't get a doctor's appointment, or maybe you can't travel.
I think in the context of identity wars and the kind of cultural divisions that we have, introducing an identity card is a really bad idea. And also there is an assault on anonymity online in particular. And we've seen, yet again, I was reading this weekend, people being visited by the police for saying fairly ordinary things, certainly things you'd hear in any pub. So I absolutely fear that for example, your online activity will be linked to a digital ID, or certainly there will be people calling for that, and many of those people are in the Labour Party, and it's actually so the department that worked on the Online Safety Act, the DSIT, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, is now going to be running the digital ID. So the same department that has been calling for ID requirements online, on the internet, on social media, will now be developing the digital ID. In fact, the same individual, I think, will be in charge of this project. So I think that it's a very, very rational concern that we could see this bleed into many different areas.
Well, it's inevitable. And look, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but even I can imagine 100 different scenarios when I can make a bulletproof argument why this digital ID must be used. I mean, Francis gave one of them. If you are attending a protest in central London, you need to scan in through the barrier so that we know who everybody is to ensure everyone's safety. Who can argue against that? And then you've got everyone who attended a protest. Then you can be extra judicious about monitoring their online activity, making sure they haven't tweeted something wrong in the last 5 years, and on it goes. And that's just one example, but we could apply that principle to hundreds of things, and suddenly you essentially create a compliance ladder where people have to do what the government thinks is the right thing to do in order to live their lives. And I don't understand, that's not the British attitude to liberty, as far as I understand this country.
Completely. This is a completely un-British idea. I think we should talk more about that, especially given that Starmer has introduced it on the pretext of patriotism, which is a joke. But on this point about protests and free speech as well, I think you're absolutely right. And a relevant thing that's happening that I've spoken to you guys about before is the introduction of live facial recognition cameras, which are being used much, much more in this country now. The Home Office right now is supporting essentially an expansion of live facial recognition across multiple police forces. And we will see that being used at some protests as well. The reason that's relevant is the digital ID is linked to your facial biometric. The government has said that already. So effectively, your barcode, in terms of the state having a record on you, is your face. So at the same time as a facial biometric digital ID is being made mandatory for every single person in the country, cameras are being introduced that scan your facial biometric. So yes, I mean, again, you can't call anyone a conspiracy theorist for saying 2 plus 2 equals 4. And so we can see that these things, these bits of surveillance architecture put together do create an enormous, very dystopian surveillance state. I do think it's likely that we could see things like that used at protests and in ways that, yeah, as you say, judge people's risk. To give them entry into certain places and not to others.
Yes.
So I was just going to say, because what we're effectively talking about here is a Chinese social credit score, isn't it?
It's something that people have worried about. I've worried about it, and I'm worried about it for a really long time. I think in what form we get this kind of mass surveillance system, I think it will differ, but I think also that the product of it has some similarities nonetheless. If you have a softer system, if you have a system where individuals know that they are being watched and recorded and data about them is being collected and it can be judged, we change the way that we behave. And I would challenge anyone to say that they don't now think twice about the way that they behave online, for example, and the things that they post, because already we have the culture has gone to a place where you worry that what your employer or a future employer or the police might think about some of the things you tweet, because of the kind of punitive culture that we've built. So I think already people feel watched and police themselves, and the more bits of surveillance you add on, the worse that becomes. Whether it falls into a full-blown Chinese-style social kind of credit system, who knows? But it feels less laughable today, doesn't it, than it probably did, 5 years ago.
Well, this is why I really want to unpack and address your point. You've mentioned a couple of times, we're not conspiracy theorists here. And I want to really address this because understanding why digital ID and this entire infrastructure is dangerous does not require an ounce of conspiratorialism whatsoever. You just have to apply basic logic. The people who are doing this, it's Keir Starmer, and behind him, we know this is being pushed by the Tony Blair Institute. Tony Blair tried to push ID cards through 20 years ago. And the reason is, and Tony Blair will tell you himself, he's a technocrat. That means he believes that government, big government, the introduction of government information about everybody, aggregating data, using that combined with AI, is a way to drive humanity forward. He will say so himself. You don't need to be conspiratorial. So they believe that if they could have as much information and data about everybody in a centralized location, they can make things better. So you don't have to be conspiratorial and think there's some, there's pedo lizards running the world trying to make this happen. You just have to look at it logically and imagine that you are a person who views the world in that way. And then it all makes perfect sense. Of course you'd want more data. Of course you'd want a centralized database. Of course you'd want to, do you remember the nudge unit? You want to shape human behavior through government.
Yeah.
And this is a great way to do that.
Yeah. Already, I mean, that's what, although the briefing has been, this is only for the right to work, which is laughable, many ministers in government are saying exactly that it's the bedrock of the modern state, that this is going to revolutionise people's relationship with government. I've also seen a letter that was sent from the government round to...
I mean, they're not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely right. But that's what I mean, though. But if they are saying it in their own words, but sometimes when you reflect it back, it's like, calm down, it's just for your right to work, which it's really not. You only have to look at what they're actually saying about the plans. I've seen a letter that was circulated in Parliament to members of Parliament, a letter from the government about the plans, which says all of these things as well. It lists multiple departments in government that could use this, and it talks about completely changing the relationship between individuals and the government. That is what this is designed to do. And I think many members of the public don't like it, and I don't like it, because we see what's coming. What's coming is a very different way of governing the population. Some might even call it population control. And like you say, if you're someone that is in favour of a big state and nudging people and controlling people and hoarding masses of data on them, then of course it's a rational thing. If you want to live in a free country and a democracy, then it's a very, very dangerous thing, because people are going to have less power. And the more, I've always said it is why I work on surveillance issues and free speech, the more that you are watched, the more data that is collected on you, the less power that you have. When we are then turned from being individuals who are born free on the land and then have all of our rights and freedoms just by virtue of being born here, when that's turned into actually you need to carry a license, now you need a permit. Now you only get those things if you're carrying your digital ID and telling the government where you are and what you're doing and where you want to work and where you want to rent. Then you're not really free anymore. You have privileges, and those privileges can be taken away. Like a digital ID card
to manage your behavior.
Taken away.
To manage
exactly.
your behavior.
When a US Army soldier returned from his second tour, he didn't just bring back stories. He created sheath underwear, designed for performance and built with freedom in mind. The patented dual pouch system at sheath.com means no sticking, no sweating, and no constant adjustments. Just comfort and durability trusted by fighters, athletes, and veterans alike. Also podcasters. At sheath.com, you'll find breathable fabrics that keep you cool, whether you're working out, traveling, or in long meetings. And with over 10,000 five-star reviews, men everywhere are upgrading to sheath.com. This is more than underwear. It's confidence, it's focus, it's freedom. And with sheath.com, you get a 100% money-back guarantee on your first pair. Go to sheath.com right now, enter code TRIGGERnometry, and get 20% off today. That's sheath.com.
The biggest red flag for me, and again, if people maybe are not as interested in these issues as the three of us and haven't paid as much attention, or maybe they naturally trust the government more than us, despite what we've seen in the last 5 years, I respect that. People can have a different opinion, but I just ask them to look at the facts of this. The biggest red flag for me with all of this is they're blatantly lying.
Yes.
They're just lying. They're saying this will help to deal with illegal immigration. And their argument is we'll be able to identify illegal immigrants when they apply for a job or when they try to rent something. But we know who the illegal immigrants are, a lot of them, and they're still in this country. So knowing who they are is not going to help us deal with that problem.
I think that I completely agree that a massive red flag on this, and the reason that I think it's gone down so badly with the public is that we are being blatantly lied to, the premise that this is being sold on is that it will stop people from working illegally in this country. No one can explain, and we've seen Keir Starmer try, how that is the case. Somebody who comes here undocumented and then works for £20, £30 cash a day in the local barbers or whatever is not going to be stopped by a digital ID. And already in this country, actually every employer has a legal duty to check someone's right to work. Already it's quite onerous, really. And the same with landlords. You're supposed to check somebody's passport or their national insurance number or their visa. So if you're not already doing that, there is absolutely nothing to suggest that a digital ID will suddenly make you decide that you're going to do checks on all of your employees. It's for the birds. And even ministers that have been sent out to try and defend this in the press have basically said, well, we know it's not a silver bullet, which is just code for, we know it doesn't work, and that's not the reason. There was one junior minister that went out a few days ago, and when questioned about how on earth do you think it's going to have anything to do with illegal immigration, he actually said, well, of course it's got lots of other uses, but we don't want to talk about that now because the public will be sceptical, he said. He said, we're not going to boil the ocean now, were his exact words, because the public would be sceptical. They're just saying the quiet bit out loud. Anyone who looks at this seriously for more than 2 seconds can see it's got absolutely nothing to do with stopping boats, smashing gangs, or any of the other phrases that the government trots out. And I think what's so galling about it is that Keir Starmer has exploited working class people's concerns about those issues and treated us like we're really stupid to try and sell in something that's actually really oppressive and affects all of us, all of our rights and all of our liberties. And so I don't see how you can talk about patriotic renewal when you're treating your country like they're idiots. And he's getting the backlash that he deserves.
Do you think part of the problem is as well for people who are ambivalent or don't really see the problems that might come with this type of documentation is the fact that they've never grown up or seen an authoritarian society? If you think the UK is the norm and that's how societies have always been, then really you're not going to see the impending threat of authoritarianism at your door, are you?
Maybe, but we lived through COVID, didn't we? So, I mean, we kind of have lived through a kind of type of authoritarianism. But I think there's something else. I think there's something that speaks directly to British culture here and about the way that we do actually cherish liberty and freedom. And in a way, whilst we do have the fight of our lives on our hands in terms of getting rid of digital ID, what's quite encouraging is that millions of people have said no. We see this for what it is. We don't trust the government. We don't carry papers, and we won't be carrying digital IDs. And it's because we have never been a population that lives on licence to authorities. The authorities work for us. We don't have to prove ourselves to anyone unless we've done something wrong. And that's a kind of whole notion that underpins our society of the free-born Englishman, that we just live our lives freely until we incur on someone else's freedom. Other countries that have IDs are countries that have more like permission-based systems of rule and law that we don't have. We have common law freedoms. And so I do think it has, Keir Starmer has united the public, but just not at all in the way that he thought. Actually, he's united the public against him. He's managed to tap into national values by demonstrating his complete misunderstanding of them.
But do you think as well, how much of this do you think, Silkie, is a government, they've been in power just over a year, it's a complete shambles. I mean, people are quite open. This is one of the worst, most incompetent governments. I mean, even worse than many of the Tory governments. How much of this do you think is a government realising they don't have any power and they're going to do whatever they can to hold on to what little power they have left?
It does seem like a very desperate power grab. But I'm not sure that it will ever see, if we're successful, certainly, I don't know that it will ever see the light of day. What really worries me about it is that it seems to suggest that there are people around Starmer that have an enormous amount of influence that's unchecked. Anyone in Westminster, I'm pretty sure anyone in the country, could have heard this idea put on the table and said, don't do that now. You're just on the back of a summer of scandals. You've got the lowest approval ratings of any prime minister for decades, I think. And now you want to introduce something, a requirement on every single member of the public, something that affects each and every one of our lives, that millions of people won't be able to have, just every single ingredient for it. You've also got the historical echoes of Blair, the £5 billion of public money that was wasted on the biometric ID scheme 2 decades ago. Starmer would have to be absolutely insane to put this down on the table now, and yet he has. So clearly there's a political judgment failure, but it suggests that there are people around him who have managed to convince him that this is a good idea. And of course, we mentioned the Tony Blair Institute. There's also Labour Together, a think tank that was a pro-Starmer think tank that's very influential. And big tech funding that swims around those think tanks and institutions, from companies that would stand to earn many millions of pounds from being involved in a mandatory digital ID system. So to me, and I think many others, this does smack of big tech lobbying, basically, against all rational political judgment. It's very, very hard to think of any other reason that this would be pushed at this point in time. Even Andy Burnham, who was the ID cards minister under Blair, has said that he doesn't support this, and this is the wrong time, and this is a really bad idea.
Well, one of the things we've done, and by the way, I've never heard you talk as much about politicians as critically, because you're someone who's apolitical and you really try and stay out of it. And one thing I really do want to emphasize is how much this is not a left-right issue. And the example that I always give to people is, if you are on the left and you believe that the evil Farage is about to take over and ruin everything, why on earth would you want to give him and his party this much power to monitor and control what people say and do and where they go and all? It just, the idea that you would recognize that there's a political system in which your political opponents will at some point be in charge, and you give them this sort of power over your lives, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's an utter madness. There are very, very few issues in this country that could unite Jeremy Corbyn and Nigel Farage, and ID cards is one of them. The left of the Labour Party, well, if we look at who the kind of political sands on this, the left of the Labour Party, the Greens, Lib Dems, Reform, Conservatives, SNP, Plaid, everyone pretty much except Starmer and Starmerites are against the digital ID proposal. So yeah, it's dead in the water. The problem is, from a public point of view, the problem is that, of course, the numbers that they've got in Parliament mean that almost certainly this will survive a Commons vote. And so despite the fact that absolutely no one wants this, there is a real risk that this will pass into law in the next couple of years.
So what can we do right now? I mean, the petition, I haven't checked it as of this morning. We're recording this a few days before it goes out. I imagine it's well over 2 million now.
There's well over 2 million people have signed the official government the petition on the government website. We have a petition that has over 100,000 signatures. So yeah, combined, we're probably looking at towards 3 million signatures on a petition against. And I think now is a time for people, for anyone who cares about this issue, for anyone that doesn't want to be having to carry a QR code, a digital barcode, in order to live their lives, if you don't want your children to do that, if you want to have any semblance of a free and open society, now is a time to stand up and be counted. It's really not a time to sit out. And so I'd ask anyone who cares about this to support groups like Big Brother Watch, join the campaign, sign up for our newsletters on this, because this is just the beginning and it's going to be a bit of a rocky couple of years. Campaigners have done it before. If you think about during the Blair years, this was introduced. I mean, digital IDs are introduced every couple of years on the pretext of something or other. But a couple of years ago, a couple of decades ago, this was on the pretext of counter-terrorism, and Blair was, this massively popular prime minister, and still the civil liberties campaigners won the argument at the end of the day and got the Identity Cards Act overturned. We can do it again. We've got to. So I'd ask people to support Big Brother Watch, get involved in the campaign, and hopefully make digital IDs history. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is a really important moment. I think there's, people have busy lives, they've got families, they've got kids, they've got jobs and other things. But one of the reasons we were so glad to have you on, and we've been talking about this ourselves, I just think people don't, you see this in the polling numbers. We're told that, about half the country support digital IDs. I don't believe that once they understand what it means.
Yeah.
A lot of people, as I would be if we were not doing this work, we're not well informed about these issues because they're complicated and not that sexy, etc. But actually, they really, really matter. And I think if people are more informed about it, you will see that the attitudes change significantly. And it might make it through the Commons, or even that is, potentially questionable. But I think you will inevitably see a lot of pushback against it. And by the time it comes to actually making it into law, I don't think this government is going to be in charge anymore.
That's the thing. So they've said that they want this to be mandatory by 2029. It's not that far away, by the end of their term, that apparently all of us here in this room would have our digital IDs in our pockets, and that will be required by law. I think there's a big question mark about whether they can actually make that reality, but we can't be complacent about it because the numbers in Parliament really aren't in our favour. I think, though, with anything, when you've got half of the public who oppose this, it's unlike any other issue, because that's half of the public who then are saying potentially that they're not going to carry a digital ID. Then suddenly it's not a mandatory national system, is it? So I think actually those numbers are massively in our favour. If even a fraction of that half of the public that doesn't like this decides to stand up and be counted, then we'll win.
No, I'm saying now, I will not carry this. This is not acceptable. This is just not acceptable.
You'll be out of a job. Yeah.
I think I'll be fine. And that's the point, actually. Those of us who do have that ability to not be restricted by this have a duty to say right now, I'm not participating in this. This is not right.
I think one of the things that campaign groups like us will be important for is we need to find a way of protecting the refuseniks.
Yes.
People who are going to work and their bosses are saying, look, there's nothing I can do if you don't have your digital ID. We did that during COVID as well. We looked after people that were being shut out of their jobs and other places because of vaccine card requirements. It's un-British. We're against this sort of thing. We don't need them. It's absolutely ludicrous that a British passport is not enough for an employer to prove that you're British and that you have the right to work. You've got to have Starmer's ID card. It's absolute rubbish. So it's another reason that that for groups like us really need more strength right now to deal with what's coming.
Hypnosis gets a bad rap, but it's not a gimmick. It's a legitimate therapeutic tool backed by research, and when it comes to weight loss, it can be a game changer. Hypnotio is a self-hypnotherapy app that helps you break bad eating patterns by working at the subconscious level, where the real habits live. It's for people who are done with willpower-only plans. Hypnotio helps you tackle emotional eating, stress-related cravings, and food anxiety using proven techniques that reduce cortisol, improve portion control, and build long-term habits. All in a way that fits into real life, from your phone, tablet, or your computer. Clinical studies show that users lost twice as much weight as those using traditional diets alone, and 94% maintained that weight loss more effectively over time. It's not about hacks, it's about fixing the deeper programming. Hypnosis-based programs reduce BMI and emotional eating significantly compared to standard diets. So what are you waiting for? Use our link in the description box and pinned comment and grab 15% off your first subscription.
I mean, the other thing that there's an odd whiff about this, you go, oh, so who's going to be in charge of implementing it? Oh, it's Ewan Blair, Tony Blair's son.
I don't know. I mean, I've read about those rumours, but I don't know yet. They're at such an early stage. I don't know that anyone's contracted at all. But one thing is for sure, that the companies who are front in line to be contracted are... many of them are the same companies that give vast amounts of funding to the Tony Blair Institute, Labour Together, and some of the people around the Starmer administration. So that is definitely something to look out for. And I know there are lots of journalists that are looking into this now.
And I think one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, but we really should be, is they're going to harvest all this data. How secure is it going to be? In a city like London, where every 6 days you get your phone nicked by someone on a bike, and basically it's going to be on an app. Somebody smart is going to come up with something where they're just going to wipe it, or they're going to be able to take your ID.
I think it's a massive risk that if we're carrying around something so sensitive on our phones, what happens when your phone breaks, gets lost, stolen? And then there's a whole other layer of security risks, which is that national security these days basically is cyber security. The Ministry of Defence in this country has been hacked, I think, over 40 times in the past decade.
That we know about.
Yeah, that we know about. We lost information about some of our spies and people who'd been working undercover in Afghanistan, thanks to cybersecurity risks. If we can't protect their data, how are we going to protect the, it'll be well over 100 million people's data, because bear in mind, it's not just Brits who are going to have a Brit card, it's actually anyone living or working in the country. So it's going to be an astronomically sized database. That's happening at the same time as the government is developing something called a national data library, which is basically a centre for processing masses of data collected about the population, and introducing AI in more and more areas of government. So it does seem very, very likely that, again, a digital ID will become basically a barcode that gains access to a set of reams of your information that then will very likely be processed by different private contractors or arms of government. Who knows? But if we look at what's happened with the NHS, which is a massive trove of data, already we've had the likes of Google gaining unlawfully actually access to parts of NHS data and processing that with AI. This is like some of the most valuable data anywhere in the world. So it's sort of inevitable that that our data will be hoarded and processed in that way, and in ways that we won't have any control over. That's the problem. It's a mandatory system. If Starmer was saying he wants people to opt into this, everyone's going to love it, come and get your digital ID, let's see how that pans out. But the whole point is that we will legally have no choice.
And what's interesting as well is when we interviewed a professor of AI and ethics from Oxford University, her name is Carissa Valise, it was a brilliant interview. She said that China are actually rolling back some of their data harvesting because they realise it's a national security threat.
Yeah.
Because if you get hacked, then enemies can then use that, manipulate it, or do whatever they want.
Sorry to interject, by the way. I know a lot of people think about data breaches as like this big hacking operation of multi-million dollars from some evil. No, it's like a civil servant lifts his fucking laptop on a train, and then that's what the data breaches actually look like. And we've had those.
They can do, yeah. In fact, it was something almost exactly like that happened in the noughties that was critical to the downfall of Blair's ID scheme, because people just didn't trust it, because the government kept losing masses of data.
And it happens all the time.
Yeah. And especially now in the context that we're living in, where, you know, we do face really serious cybersecurity risks from the likes of China and Russia. This will be, there will basically be a target over this database. And if it is compromised, then the consequences could be really, really grave for the whole country, to be honest, but also for individuals. The fact that our biometric data will be on there, potentially with everything from tax, health, where you live, work, enormous amounts of data about you. But underpinned by that biometric, it's really serious. That's information you can't change. It's not like if you lose a password, you quickly change your password and then try and protect everything again. You can't change your face. You can't change your fingerprints. So it really means that the risks here are elevated massively.
And it's also coming down to competency as well. If people are watching this and they're like, I don't know what side of the fence to fall on with this particular thing, do you trust this government to be able to do anything effectively or competently? We don't have a border. Let's just be honest about that. We don't. People flood in. We're trying to deport people. I think the first flight for people to be deported from this country left empty. How do you expect them to run this?
Well, and an IT program. The government running anything, you know, as you say, people always question the competence of government, especially at the moment. But the government running an IT project, no, it's always plagued with really serious issues, and cost the country billions of pounds as well. It's something else that just hasn't been factored in here. How much is it going to cost? You know, the country just simply doesn't have the money to waste on this, going absolutely nowhere. I think the Border Security Command cost about £100 million. There's a budget of about £100 million. Well, 5 billion was wasted last time this country tried to introduce digital IDs. That's about 50 times the amount of the Border Security Command. Very, very clearly, this isn't about immigration. So again, I think if somebody's struggling to kind of choose a side on this issue, the starting point is the government's lying to you. This isn't being introduced in order to root out people working illegally in this country. So the next question is, why is it being introduced? And how is it going to impact your life? And I think those are some of the things that obviously we're talking about today. I think they're things to be really worried about.
Do you think it's a very cynical ploy by Starmer as a way to actually try and sell this to people who are very concerned, and quite rightly so, about illegal immigration?
I think it's appalling. I think it's a disgraceful way to treat the public. Keir Starmer is treating the public like we're complete idiots. He's used the pretext to rehash a very old policy that's really unpopular. And he's thought that by tapping into these concerns and then talking about patriotism, that he could sell it into the public in a new way. That's backfired. Instead, everyone's looking at him and saying, you're clearly not telling the truth. It's clearly not about that. So you've shown two things. One is that you've got absolutely no idea what to do about people working illegally in the country. And second is that you don't understand patriotism at all. You don't understand British values, because this is about as un-British as it gets. We've always rejected ID cards, and we're going to reject them this time around.
Well, that's the hope here for me politically. And look, you know, Francis says it's the worst government in history. I actually don't think that's true. I don't think they're particularly incompetent, more than the Tories or whatever. And I said this at the time of when the election happened. I did an article and a video about it. And the point I was making is Britain's problems are structural in nature. They were going to be very difficult to solve no matter who's in charge. Starmer is very, very unpopular because he hasn't made an impact on those issues. But I just do not understand the electoral logic behind this. It's suicidal.
Absolutely.
And if they want to try this, I think we will make this his poll tax. It could well be the end of his premiership if he actually goes for this. But the problem is he's committed to it now. So he's either in a position where he has to go all out and then it will become his poll tax, or he has to do a U-turn, which will also not be great.
Yeah.
It's a weird time.
That's why I think we can't be complacent about it. It's quite clear the writing's on the wall. This has bombed in the worst possible way. Any policy that affects every single individual member of the public that half of them are saying no to is going to be a disaster. But he's in it now. He's made the commitment and they've put a time frame on it. They've said that by 2029, each and every one of us will have to have this digital ID. So it does mean really that if we are to defeat it, which I think we can and we will, the way in which that happens will probably be one of the nails in the coffin for Starmer, because it really threatens his premiership, especially since he's introduced this policy at Labour conference when the conference is supposed to be about his survival and about the survival of the government, and the flagship policy is giving us all a digital ID. He's shown how completely out of touch he is with the public. He's tried to lie to the public. It hasn't gone down well, and I think he will reap the consequences. But it won't come easily for us as campaigners.
Well, we're going to have to make sure that doesn't happen. One of the things I just find, you highlighted a couple of times already, just how extraordinary the deceit is in this all, because you've got a large number of people who, as Francis says, rightly are frustrated with the fact that we have an open border. It's not because they hate immigrants, it's just like countries need borders. It's a basic requirement of statehood. And that is being used, that legitimate concern that people have expressed for a long time, which is driving the rise of reform that Labour are so concerned about, that is being used in a way that they're not actually going to fix the problem. Instead, they're going to deliver this authoritarian policy that will be in our lives, much like, we are now, a lot of people, I think, realizing that many of the reasons the country is screwed up in the ways that it's screwed up is because of the Blair government 20 years ago that introduced a bunch of legislation that we're still living the consequences of. So you're going to get an abortive Starmer government that's in power for a couple of years, whose only legacy is to do these shenanigans, and we are then left, if they are successful, with this crap on the statute book.
Yeah. I think a part of the reason that people are flooding to reform is because they don't trust politicians anymore and they just want something new and that seems anti-establishment. That's kind of the read that some people have. This policy actually demonstrates yet again that the public is being lied to by people who think that they can treat us like we're completely ignorant and born yesterday, and the public aren't buying it. I think there was some weird irony about the fact that Starmer introduced this in a speech about patriotic renewal, he was saying, and he was talking about reform quite directly and saying that he was talking about working class people having the politics of grievance, and he was implying that a lot of this grievance that people have is manufactured, which I think is, and then minutes later he said, so we're going to have a digital ID to stop the boats. So I think he has built up a caricature of the working class and saying that the things that working class people care about aren't really real, but let me borrow one of those, stopping the boats. And there you go. Here's the policy we've been trying to introduce for the past couple of decades. It's really, I think it's really, really appalling. If people felt before that they didn't know what Starmer stands for, I think maybe they know now. And it's basically some sort of bland Blairite policies and corporate interests. I think that's what this feels like. It feels like population management. Doesn't really feel like someone that's got an aspiration for the country, that understands the things that ordinary people care about, or the values that we live by.
Let me introduce you to the people I work with to protect my family against financial instability, inflation, and turmoil. For me, one of the best ways to safeguard your wealth is by investing in gold, and that's why I trust the Pure Gold Company. Here's a smart tip. If you buy UK minted gold coins like sovereigns, you won't pay VAT when you buy them or capital gains tax when you sell. All the profit is yours to keep. And the best part? Gold is a completely private investment. It's outside the banking system, so it can't be manipulated by governments or anyone else. Unlike digital assets, it's yours in the truest sense. The Pure Gold Company is trusted by first-time investors and seasoned professionals alike. What I really appreciate about them is a knowledgeable, pressure-free approach. They explain everything clearly, so you feel confident about your decisions, and they never push you to buy. Physical gold has stood the test of time as a store of value, and it offers peace of mind that other assets can't match. It's reassuring to know that even if the banking system falters, your gold and its value remains safe. Whether you're looking to diversify your investments, protect your savings, or just gain the security of owning a real physical asset, we highly recommend the Pure Gold Company. Click the link in the description or go to pure-gold.co/trigger to get your free copy of the investor guide. That's pure-gold.co/trigger. Take control of your financial future today.
Do you remember when we were kids, Silkie, and we said something or that people didn't like and went, oh, it's a free country, what are you going to do? Nobody says that anymore, do they?
It feels much less free, doesn't it? Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you say, I mean, if this does go ahead, if we do have mandatory digital IDs, it will be one of the legacies of the Starmer government that we then continue to live with. It's not something, the harms that are caused by something like a mandatory digital ID scheme are long-lasting and irreversible. We have to be really clear about that. You don't introduce something like this and then 6 months later have it taken away and everyone deletes their digital ID. It doesn't happen. If this is rolled out, it's something that the British public are going to have to live with. If it's something we have to live with, it is something that will expand and grow in all of the ways that we've discussed, from the internet to benefits, health, AI being used to process the data. If you just look at the flow of the tide in politics towards all of these areas, digital ID will become the thing that gets caught up and that gets expanded every single time. In fact, the question will be, why aren't we using the digital IDs for this? Let's start with, it's going to be used for the right to work. Mm-hmm. Currently, they're looking at somebody's citizenship and immigration status. Why aren't they looking at their benefit status? That's an oversight, isn't it? Shouldn't we look at their benefit status? If we're looking at their benefit status, shouldn't we look at their bank accounts and see actually what money's in the bank accounts? Again, let's look at this in concert. The Starmer government has just introduced mass bank spying powers on the premise of rooting out welfare fraud. The work and pensions...
Can I just pause you there? What does mass banking spying powers, what does that actually mean in the realities of it, the practicalities?
So the Starmer government has just introduced a new law that means that private banks have to search data about all of us, basically root through our bank statements all the time in order to flag people that they think might be receiving a benefit that shouldn't be receiving a benefit. And given how complex the benefit system is, that's obviously destined for disaster. But that's millions and millions of our bank statements being routed through for government administration purposes, basically. So we're seeing expansions of surveillance in multiple different areas of life. That's on the premise of rooting out welfare fraud. The Work and Pensions Secretary has said in the days after the announcement about digital IDs, we can use this for welfare fraud too. It's something that Blair said years ago. So soon, then you've got, it's not just about the right to work, it's also about benefits. When it's about benefits, it's about banking. Again, the government webpage has already spoken about digital IDs being used for private banking too. And then when you've got benefits, work and banking, you probably should have health, because that relates to your benefits as well. And so the force, the impetus will be, why aren't you using the digital ID for these other areas? It's an oversight, isn't it? And so that's how it will expand.
We could cut theft from supermarkets by making sure everyone taps in at the entrance, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Sure.
Right? You can't come in unless you've scanned your digital ID. We've got a lot of people stealing stuff from shops, right? Because the police aren't enforcing the law.
Yeah.
So we could solve that with digital ID.
Absolutely.
And on and on and on and on it goes. Because once you have the infrastructure, you are not going to run out of reasons to use it.
Yeah. I think with all of this, if you don't make the case for liberty, you just give way to authoritarianism. Yeah. The time to make case for liberty is now, because this is the opening of the floodgates, the introduction of a mandatory digital ID. That's the point of no return. Once we've got one, fighting its expansion will be very, very difficult. But the time to really put up a fight is now, so that we never have a mandatory digital ID in this country. Because if we do, what's inevitable is that it will spiral into many, many areas of our life, and it will become a permit, and it will become something that is used not to help people gain access to stuff, but to stop people from doing stuff that the government doesn't want them to do.
And also as well, and I think this is an important point to raise, like, let's go back again to COVID. Do you remember the trucker protests?
In Canada, yeah.
In Canada. Do you remember when they froze bank accounts?
Exactly.
I mean, if it's linked to your bank account and you're doing something that the government finds affects the safety of others, and we've spoken about how nebulous that term is, well, I mean, it's one step away from freezing bank accounts, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, that's, and look, Boris Johnson sat in your seat right there when we interviewed him, and in the Substack section, which we're about to do with you, where our supporters get to ask our guest questions, we talked about COVID. And I said to him, look, you were this libertarian prime minister, and yet you did all of these things. And do you know what he said? He said, well, this is what the public wanted. Now, I remember the public, quite a lot of the public, wanted people who weren't vaccinated not to be allowed to go to the hospital, not to get a doctor's appointment. So if you are in a situation where the public demands something, and you've got a class of politicians who will do whatever it is the public demand because the media has lied to them endlessly, what you're going to end up in, if you've got this system, is people denied all kinds of things, not just banking. You know, you attended a protest, or you didn't get vaccinated, or you did this, or you did that. Well, why should you get a doctor's appointment on our brilliant NHS? What, do you deserve that? No. We've tracked your behavior. You tweeted 3 times about how the NHS isn't as good as it should be. It's people. You made the point about conspiratorial. I really don't think this is conspiratorial at all. This is not hard to imagine when you look at the last 5 years that we all lived through.
Yeah. I don't think we should be squeamish about pointing out the risks whatsoever, because at this point we have lived through that period, and also we just cannot assess something like this without applying the political knowledge that we have and historical knowledge that we have. And Johnson, the fact that the Johnson government introduced COVID IDs is a perfect example. You had somebody that professed to be a libertarian who's now saying, in light of Starmer's announcement, that he will never carry a digital ID. And yet when he was in government, he basically did introduce one himself. People know that governments kind of follow the tide of public opinion, which, by the way, is not, there are elements to which opinion can be guided and manufactured as well, of course. And I think that's why people don't trust this, and people aren't going to buy it. And millions of people, you're one, I'm one, Francis, you can have a digital ID.
Oh, absolutely. I'm here for it.
Millions of us just won't do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, on that happy note, Silkie, it's always great to have you on the show. Please keep up your good work at Big Brother Watch. We're big fans of yours. It's always great to have you on the show. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions from our supporters in a second. But before we do, what do you think is the one thing that we're not talking about that we should be?
I think what no one's talking about is the massive expansion of surveillance in other areas at the moment that put together with the digital ID we should be really worried about. The massive expansion of live facial recognition cameras across the country, and mass bank spying powers as well that have been introduced by the Starmer government. So this is a government that's expanding surveillance in lots of different areas. And so when we talk about digital ID, it's important to think about the other things that are happening and how these might link together.
Silkie, thank you very much. Head on over to triggerpod.co.uk where we ask Silkie your questions.
At what point do these increasingly authoritarian laws spill over to no longer being a free country? And what point is the tipping point at which we all say no more?